Everyone thinks they're so clever for saying that you use missiles to force enemies into losing their energy. But what if I told you that you could legitimately use the infrared air-to-air missiles as your primary offensive weapon within the game's current meta? How? Well, sit tight lads, that's exactly what I'm about to explain. Good afternoon you wee bastards, and welcome back to another War Thunder video with Koala. In today's video we're going to be talking about the use of IR missiles in top tier ARB. Now, I'm sure most players will say that the missiles, the AIM-9B Sidewinders on the F100D Super Sabre, the de Havilland Firestreaks on the Javelin FAW Mark 9, and the R3S or K13s on the MiG-19 PT Farmer B aren't really all that useful for getting kills with, and should primarily be used to force the enemy aircraft to evade and thereby lose their airspeed. This is probably the most efficient use of these missiles right now. I'm not trying to say that it's not, but I personally don't enjoy using my air-to-air missiles as, well, practically decoys, just designed to be a pain in the ass to your enemies in order to make them easier to kill with guns, rather than a legitimate weapon in and of themselves. That doesn't make the missiles seem very special in my personal opinion, and so I've spent the past few weeks learning the top tier meta and figuring out just what these missiles can do. On the Javelin, practically nothing, they suck. All jokes aside, I personally believe that these missiles were implemented really quite well by Gaijin, and I commend them on their work. The only issues I have is the extremely obvious incoming missile warning, which makes them way too easy to evade. These missiles have a very limited tracking ability compared to modern variants, the US AIM-9X or Russian R-73. They're rear aspect only, they have very low G tolerance, and were primarily used to hit bomber aircraft from multiple kilometers away in real life. Against other fighter jets, these very early infrared missiles were quite lackluster. This is reflected well in game. However, the sporadic nature of top tier jet dogfights, with jets rolling and turning all the time and pulling far higher Gs than would be feasible in real life, coupled with the very obvious incoming missile warning, means that these missiles are even harder to use effectively as offensive weapons. While you might be capable of locking a target from 3 kilometers away, firing a missile from this distance will practically never net you a kill, unless the enemy player is AFK. But at close range, engagements don't exactly happen realistically, with hostile jets trailing your 6 while you perform slight rolls and pulls in order to stay away from your assailant's guns, or maintain a smooth turn in order to stay out of the firing arc, with both pilots having the same reactions to G-forces regardless of the turning capability of their planes. Nope. In War Thunder, we fly around pulling 9 or 10 Gs regularly, whatever our plane can pull, and we have markers and a third-person camera, allowing players to see enemies well below their own aircraft's nose. This means that most jet kills are achieved through what's called snapshots, where the enemy crosses in front of your guns for a split second perpendicular to you, and you fire early with the intent of having your round intercept the enemy. They fly into a wall of bullets and, well, if you're me, you usually get sparks, but that's how most kills are achieved. Even more modern missiles like the American AIM-9Ls or Soviet R-60Ms on the helicopters would struggle to follow such a maneuver. They can't pull 90-degree turns after all, and they can't intercept a target that quickly. And our current air-to-air missiles on a fighter jet have no chance of even picking up the target in that kind of engagement, as, once again, they're rear aspect only. You have to have a sustained visual on your enemy's thick ass. And there's our demonetization for the day. So all of this has led to the common saying that your missiles really only exist to force an enemy aircraft to evade them, and in doing so throw away their energy and speed. And according to McChickenbites, who's an experienced jet pilot and popular YouTuber, you should not ever expect to get kills with them, there's not a whole lot of use for them, and that they're a utility rather than a weapon. Well, that just wasn't good enough for me. I set my sights on finding a more lucrative way to use these missiles and find out if they could be used as primary offensive weapons. Matter of fact, they can, and the method is, well, it may surprise you. Now, my last video was mainly historically focused, this one's going to be devoted to gameplay over history, so if you're about to get triggered because that's not how you use them in real life, I know, this isn't real life. I also want to point out that this is not a how to fly for the new Tier 6 aircraft. I don't think I'm experienced enough with them to make something like that right now, maybe in future, but sooner or later we'll have more Tier 6 jets coming on top of them, like F-104 Starfighters or F-4 Phantoms. This isn't even really a how to use missiles guide. As I said, it's still very worthwhile using them as a distraction to make enemies lose their energy, even though that doesn't always work as well as you might think. But if you want to specifically get kills with the air-to-air missiles, if you want to challenge yourself to use your missiles offensively, this is how you should do it. So the thing I've found is, everyone's been somewhat overthinking this. Players have been acting as if these missiles raise the opportunity for killing potential, or should, treating these missiles as an additional armament that will allow them to kill more enemies, aircraft which they could not otherwise kill with gunfire. This is not the case. Actually, if you want to reliably get kills with air-to-air missiles, and note that I say reliably, you have to think of them as quite the opposite. These aren't a weapon for new types of engagements, allowing you to get kills from multiple kilometers away or hit targets that you couldn't aim your guns at. Actually, they basically just function as extra ammunition, allowing you to splash enemy aircraft without expending cannon rounds, so long as you're able to stay hot in their tail. You should be using these missiles instead of cannons as your primary weapon of choice while you are trailing an enemy 6, instead saving your cannon rounds for snapshots. This is especially true for the MiG-19, which does not carry a large amount of rounds, and with its flight performance as far as rudder control goes, it relies on intercepting aircraft more so than sitting on their 6 for half a minute. During engagements where you find yourself directly behind an enemy, you should be aiming to score that kill with your missiles, not your guns. You should be firing them from no more than 800 meters away, which will heavily reduce the likelihood of that enemy aircraft receiving the incoming missile warning and therefore evading in time, and you should be waiting for the enemy to straighten out after a turn, as these missiles, for all intents and purposes, might as well not be able to turn at all. If you didn't know, the bright red warning saying that the rocket has been launched pops up on your screen after an amount of time since the missile was fired. It doesn't show up immediately. This interval between the missile being launched and the warning appearing is dependent on crew skill, but even an aced crew will only see the warning for a split second if you're firing from, say, 500-600 meters away. This is well within gun range for these aircraft, and you'd be more than capable of downing that enemy aircraft with cannon fire if you choose to, but this is the exact time when your missiles are at their most lethal. What you need to do is warm up your missiles as you head into the engagement, waiting, holding to your opponent's 6, and then firing as soon as they straighten out from a turn, either because they want to reverse that turn, because the pilot was G-locking, or because they're trying to extend and disengage. Not exactly the least realistic way of using these missiles after all, actually. This is how US Navy F-8 Crusaders would attack MiG-17s over Hanoi in the Vietnam War. But in-game, this is really your best option for using missiles in dogfights in ARB. The only other time you're likely to get kills with them is if someone is really not paying attention or they're AFK climbing, which some pilots are still crazy enough to do even now. Hold off and save your cannon rounds for split-second engagements when it wouldn't be physically possible to get a positive lock with your air-to-air missiles, when an enemy is coming at you head-on, or when they're flying too erratically for a missile to retain positive lock. You should also keep in mind that your cannon rounds only fire directly forward on a ballistic trajectory, while your air-to-air missiles have a much wider circle within which they can aim at an enemy aircraft in front of you, so if you can't quite get your Pipper on target, you might still be able to score an easy missile kill. Don't think about each engagement as either a gunfight or a missile-based fight, however. Try to use both, alternating back and forth as per the situation's requirements. If you're fighting at close range against an enemy intent on dodging and weaving all over the place, so much so that your AIM-9B could never retain a positive lock, then obviously you'll be focusing on shooting the enemy down with your cannons. It's still worth, though, warming up your sidewinders anyway, as they're likely to straighten out at some point, and at this time, it'll be better to send a missile off than to waste cannon rounds when you don't have to. At the same time, if a missile does fail to track, don't let that player get away. You should be ready to shoot him down at a moment's notice if he's able to dodge the missile and disengage. Say if he has the energy advantage and is extending further than 800 meters. Basically, what I'm saying is that if you can get a missile kill, you could pretty easily get a gun kill instead, but at the same time, guns are more useful than missiles, and you can use guns in head-ons and snapshots when you couldn't use AAMs. In other words, cannon rounds are more valuable while missiles are more expendable, so if you're in a situation where you're trailing your enemy 6 and could shoot them down with either your cannons or your IR missiles, it's always worth using the missiles first. Save those cannon rounds for when you need them most, and you'll never have to go back to base to rearm, or find yourself being engaged in a head-on without any rounds left to fire back with. Now, I did say this wasn't a how-to-fly guide for Tier 6 jets, but I am going to say this. Don't go trying to fly at Mach 1.2 all the time. Number one, you aren't even able to do that in a straight line on the deck, and number two, you'll tear your wings straight off if you have to pull any hard Gs to engage or evade anyone. What you should be trying to do is match speed with your opponent so that you can stay on his 6, about 500 meters away. Any closer and he'll be able to turn inside your firing arc and you may not be able to keep up with him, let's say it's a MiG-17. Stay at 500 to 600 meters away, and as he turns, you'll be able to catch him in that turn and take him out with cannon fire. Much further than that, and it'll be too easy for that aircraft to evade your air-to-air missiles, and you may waste too many cannon rounds getting the lead down, especially if you're new to these cannons and still learning the aim. Use your air brakes and come off the afterburner to match speed with your opponent, trying not to overshoot, and be sure to firewall that sucker if you happen to slow down too much. Of course, if you do have a good 300 kph speed advantage on your target, don't throw that away, just make sure that if and when you overshoot that you're not presenting him with an easy target for more than a second. As players learn the new tier 6 meta, more of them are engaging like this, which means that you'll be able to slot onto their 6 when they slot onto your allies. This is something you should always be looking to do in jet combat anyway, protecting your allies, working as a team, and taking advantage of enemies who are tunnel visioned trying to take down a teammate, but it's even more helpful to you in a tier 6 jet, as a tunnel visioned enemy makes for an easy missile kill, as long as you can coordinate just a little with your teammate to get him to fly straight when you launch. It can also be worth climbing in these jets, which is something I wasn't quite expecting. 3 months ago, anyone who climbed in top tier jets was pretty clearly a noob. You just don't do that in 9.0 jets. And the reason for this is that they can reach their top speeds in a straight line on the deck anyway, so there's no reason to make yourself vulnerable in a climb. You have no more energy left to gain after all. In tier 6 jets though, you cannot reach your top speed at sea level, and you may need the altitude to convert into airspeed in order to egress out of a furball. Don't side climb though, you don't have time. Rush in at low altitude, gain speed, and then zoom climb. Lastly, if someone's trying to fire their missiles from longer ranges in order to force you to go defensive, evade the missile and lose your energy, then there's an easy way around that. Firstly, don't turn too sharply. You only need to pull 4 Gs for the Heatseeker to lose its lock anyway, and the more Gs you pull, the more speed you lose, which is exactly what your enemy wants. Secondly, always try to pull up, as you'll gain the altitude which you can then trade back into airspeed afterwards and continue pulling away from your assailant. It's honestly similar to how props are constantly trading speed for altitude or altitude for speed, and not something 9.0 jet pilots will be used to, but it does make it impossible for your assailant to take away your energy by firing a missile at you and forcing you on the defensive, which is how most people are still trying to use them. Oh, one last thing, make sure you yell Fox 2 whenever you launch a heat-seeking air-to-air missile, it gives you plus 10 RNG. Anyway lads, that is going to do us for this video. I really hope you have enjoyed this one, found it informative, and that if you did, you'll leave a like on this video and let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Please keep in mind that this is only a guide for Air RB. I don't play arcade, I'm extremely inexperienced with that game mode, so anything I could say wouldn't really be as well founded, and I don't play much sim, although I would like to do some videos on tier 6 jets in simulator battles sometime in the near future, just to see how the missiles function there and if they're noticeably more potent. Make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon, join the 360 squad, come join the Koala tree, follow me on social media, and if you want to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the video description. I really appreciate the support. Anyway, until next time lads, keep your bagpipes to hand, keep your kilt firmly on, and I shall see you next video. I say a wee thank you to these lads for supporting me on Patreon. DA261, Labvian Wolf, Gisli Gararson, and Dark Recon. You lads are bra. If you wish to join them, come check out the link in the description below.